Hello, I'm going to be your guide through some of the trenches of World War One. This terrible war started on July the 28th, 1914, with the killing of the Archduke of Austria. A week later, Germany declared war on Belgium and France. By the end of 1914, the French and Belgians managed to hold the German troops. This is when the trench warfare started. It lasted for 4 years, ending on the 11th of November 1918. Neither side gained much ground in this time. I will now jump in a plane and show you what a trench looks like. A typical trench consisted of 3 main trenches. There is a front line, also called the main fire trench, facing the enemy. It is not straight, but follows the natural features of the land, making it a good defence area, or giving a view over the enemy's trenches. It is also dug in sections, rather than a straight line, so if a bomb shell explodes inside one of these, or an enemy gets into one, only that section is affected. The front line used barbed wire to protect the trenches. Troops caught up in the wire became easy targets for the enemy machine gunners and snipers. Behind it, approximately 75 metres, is another line, called a support line, similar made to the front line. The front line and support line are connected with communication trenches to move supplies, equipment and men forward without being seen. If the front line got taken over by the enemy, the support line would become the main fighting trench. In the support trench, holes called dugouts are cut into the side of the trench walls, normally very small, but with room for 3 to 4 men to squeeze in for shelter. Another 300 metres back, the third trench was the reserve trench. Here the reserve troops could group for a counterattack if the first 2 trenches were taken. The third trench would be often where the commander would be. The open space between the 2 front lines is called no man's land because no soldier wanted to cross this field for fear of attack. The climate in France and Belgium was quite wet, so no man's land soon became a mud bath. It was so thick that soldiers could disappear into it and never be seen again. The enemy had a very similar system of trenches. The distance between the 2 lines varied from as little as 30 metres to several hundred metres. I will now show you around the trenches. Be careful, put your helmet on and keep your head down. The enemy might have snipers out there, so we don't want to be seen. The trenches are only just deep enough for an average soldier standing. Let's go and find some of our brave soldiers. Hi Bob, would you have time to answer some of my questions?
Yeah, shoot ahead.
I was wondering, what sorts of weapons are being used in the trenches?
Every soldier inside the trench would have 3 weapons, a rifle, a bayonet and about 3 hand grenades. The Germans had the machine guns first, and then we quickly caught up with better British machine guns. So now we are evenly matched. Being on duty at machine gun is very risky, because in the enemy's eyes, we are the target.
What about those whee boom things that fly through the air?
Oh, you mean the mortars? We use them mainly for getting through the barbed wire of the enemy when we are going to attack and destroy their trenches. The mortars are sort of little bombs. These are very hard to aim precisely, so it's a bit hit and miss.
Last question. What is your heaviest weapon?
That would be the tanks. We were the first to use these in 1915. Problem was, when we take them out into no man's land, they break down very easily, not by getting shot at, but by getting stuck in the muck. They are very powerful though, and blow up everything in their way.
Thanks, Bob. I'll go and talk to some others now. Hi there, you don't look that well. What's happened? I got hit by a mortar, but I'm lucky because about 6,000 men a day die out here. All by being hit by gunfire mortars and sorts? No, besides this, men are dying of diseases spread by millions of rats and lice, such as trench fever and Weil's disease. In winter, we have to endure the cold and wet conditions in these trenches, which can fill up with ice-cold water, sometimes up to our waist. A lot of my mates got trench foot, which is a fancy name for your feet rotting away. Shell shock is another biggie. People got brain injury because of this pressure and noise of a shell exploding nearby. Not a place for you to be, girl. 10% of all the soldiers there fighting in this war die. That is very sad. I think I better move on. The trenches are dug by soldiers. Sometimes the soldiers just dug the trenches straight into the ground. It was fast, but left the soldiers open to enemy fire while they were digging. Sometimes they would build the trenches by extending a trench on one end. The most secret way to build a trench was to make a tunnel and then remove the roof when the tunnel was complete. Tunnelling was the safest method, but also the most difficult. A total of about 140,000 Chinese used as cheap workers to dig trenches and fill sandbags on the Western Front. Hello, can you understand me? Hong Xing Quang Dong. I think I'll forget about interviewing you. Konsa. Okay, bye. We are now going to explore another dangerous situation around the corner here. The First World War is seen as one of the first times of use of gas in warfare. On April the 22nd, 1915, the German army used chlorine gas at the Battle of Ypres. Although very few people died, the news of this started widespread panic. Gas masks became a common part of the soldiers' equipment. Both sides of the war used gas as a weapon. Good day there. Hi, can I ask you a couple of questions about what's going on here? What sort of gases are being used? There are 3 sorts of poison gas: chlorine, phosgene gas, and mustard gas. What do these do to you? They are horrible. Chlorine gas is smelly and irritating. It burns your lungs and can suffocate you. Phosgene gas, which is like chlorine gas but causes less coughing, so it is harder to notice and more likely to be breathed in. Last one, mustard gas, causes watering eyes, burning of the throat and lungs, and also blistering skin. All 3 are hard to detect and cause much fear. I better leave here before the gas attacks me. As you leave, watch out for our camouflaged sniper up there, hiding in the trees. He just shot 3 enemy soldiers in the head. Hello again, audience. We have been blasted to the reserve trench, the furthest away from the frontline trench. This is where the commander's headquarters are. I would like to introduce you to Commander Jeffrey Porters. Salute! At ease. Sir, can I please use some of your valuable time? I'm dying to ask you some questions. Can you tell me about the tactics used in trench warfare? The usual tactics are a bit dull, and everyone knows what's going to happen. The way to attack a trench is that at night about 100 men run into the machine gun fire and barbed wire of the enemy, hoping to make a breakthrough, which is almost impossible. The aim is to capture a few Germans to question them. Sometimes the enemy fires up flares, which shows the Germans exactly where everyone is, and the machine guns would rattle them down. The way to defend our own trenches is for men to stand all along the trench and shoot at the enemy running towards them. Just know that the defense system is 5 times better than the attacking system. How long would a soldier be at the front line for? The typical pattern for a trench routine would be 4 days in the front line, then 4 in the reserve trench, and finally 4 at rest. This system depends on the weather and how many reserve troops are available. Trench life is usually very boring and hard work, with repairing trenches except for when an attack was underway. Because of the boredom, our soldiers can lose concentration. For example, by not being careful, they can expose themselves to sniper fire, which can prove deadly. That's why at dawn and dusk, the whole British line is ordered to stand to, which means a time of manning the trench as if in preparation for an enemy attack. Can you tell us a bit about the conditions in the trenches, for example, hygiene and food? The men are not able to wash themselves in the trenches. There is limited access in clean water, which is only used for drinking. The toilets of the trenches are usually just large buckets in a side trench, but they are not always used. Soldiers in the trenches do not get much sleep. When they do, it is in the afternoon during daylight, and at night only for an hour at a time. Rations and other supplies are always brought up at night under cover of darkness. The enemy knows this, of course, and they will shell and shoot at the known tracks leading to the front. The men in the trenches cook for themselves using braziers. It is important that smoke from fires is masked so it does not give away their position. Otherwise, again, the enemy will aim at them. Thank you, sir. This has given me a clear picture of the conditions in the trenches. I will leave you now to do your important job. The Western Front saw the digging of almost 10,000 kilometres of trenches on both sides. While war in these trenches during World War I is described as horrible, the reality is that the trench system protected the soldiers from the modern firepower used for the first time during this war. I hope I have given you a little snapshot of how life was in the trenches during World War I. Thank you for tagging along. Let's make sure a war like this does not happen again.